think what we've done is come up with a creative solution.
Tonight, the federal government answers the national inquiry's request for an extension, but it's not what the commission asked for.
Melting permafrost shut down the Northwest Territory's biggest pipeline, and now Enbridge's fix means the old pipeline will stay under the Mackenzie River.
I was a young Mohawk woman, Indigenous woman, who had this crazy dream of going to the Olympics.
And Waneek Horn-Miller is among honourees at Rideau Hall.
Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward.
And I'm Melissa Ridgen. We begin tonight in Ottawa, where the federal government announced a 6-month extension for the national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
The government also responded to recommendations from the inquiry's November interim report. Here's Annette Francis with more.
Good morning.
The news came early this morning. Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett told reporters there have been discussions across the country with family members, Indigenous organizations, and the provinces and territories about an extension.
Based on those discussions, we found support for giving the inquiry more time to submit its final report, but little support for the Commission's mandate to extend beyond the next election. By giving the Commission until April 30th, 2019 to complete its report instead of the initial date of November 1st, 2018.
A 6-month extension is a far cry from the Commission's request of 2 years. But according to Minister Bennett, it underscores the urgency of the issues.
I think what we've done is come up with a creative solution where we can be able to provide the Commission with more time to hear from families and to do the research on the institutional systemic issues at the same time as we maintain the integrity of a national public inquiry.
As for the Commission's interim report released last November, $10 million will go to a commemoration fund through Status of Women Canada. The interim report also called for a national police task force. That would focus on missing and murdered Indigenous women, review files, and potentially reopen cases. The government said it will wait for the final report to decide on that. In the meantime, funds will go towards a national investigative unit.
With an investment of nearly $10 million over 5 years to focus on homicide investigations. Housed within the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, it will act as a natural centre of expertise and oversight for high-profile major case investigations, increasing the prospect of successful investigations and criminal prosecutions.
There will also be an investment of $21.3 million for health supports for families and survivors.
This will allow the expansion of services to include all survivors and family members impacted by these tragedies, improve their access to health support services, and increase the time frame during which health support services will be available to them.
According to Minister Bennett, further discussions will take place with the Commission to determine if more funding would be granted to complete its work. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
We'll hear from the inquiry's Chief Commissioner, Marion Buller, later in the show.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau flew to British Columbia today to meet with a committee of Indigenous advisors about the Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion Project. As APTN's Tina House explains, he was met with opposition upon arrival.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau arrived at the Chim First Nation to a group of about 30 water protectors carrying signs and drumming. He's here to meet with the Indigenous Advisory and Monitoring Committee.
This committee has been set up so that all the different communities along this Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline route, for example, are able to weigh in and participate in the decisions that are made that will affect them as we move forward with this project.
The committee was developed in January of 2018, and it consists of 11 different First Nation communities that are along the pipeline route. They provide advice about Indigenous and environmental concerns, socioeconomic outcomes, and safety. However, being on the committee doesn't necessarily mean that they support the project. And outside, those who oppose the Kinder Morgan buyout demanded to be heard.
We cannot have economic development that destroys our environment, and that's what the fossil fuel industry is doing. Instead, we must move as rapidly as we can to a clean energy economy.
Now that the federal government has a more direct role in the construction of this pipeline expansion, that we get it done right, that we get it done in a way that does benefit everyone and minimize some of the concern.
The Cheam First Nation has about 350 members, and the Chief and Council are in full support of the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
We'll have a new pipe built to contemporary standards, and that argues well where the environment is concerned and where the protection of wildlife and fish populations are concerned. Sacred sites and heritage sites and special places where our community members gather medicinal plants and food plants. So overall, I think this is good. This will prove to be good for First Nations.
The Trans Mountain Pipeline will impact an estimated 117 Indigenous communities, from the tar sands in Alberta to Burnaby, BC. Tina House, APTN National News, Cheam First Nation.
And we would like to hear what you have to say about this or any other story. Here's how to contact us. Send an email to news@aptn.ca, like our APTN National News Facebook page. Follow us on Twitter @APTN News, or go to our website, aptnnews.ca.
After a 2-year shutdown, Enbridge's Line 21, the biggest oil pipeline in the Northwest Territories, will be back up and running next month. But the clock ticks down, and many are concerned, and they're voicing those concerns at community meetings. Here's Charlotte Moritz-Jacobs at one of them.
Last Wednesday, residents of Fort Simpson gathered at a community information session to hear about Enbridge's plan to reopen Line 21. Catherine Pennington and other Enbridge staff gave technical updates.
This project came into service in the mid-1980s and was very safe, certainly from the day that it was constructed through operation, and was safe at the time in which it was installed. And we've continued to have intense monitoring as we do all of our...
The flow of oil was halted in November of 2016 because it sits on an unstable riverbank. The section of the pipe being replaced is 10 kilometers north of Fort Simpson. The Quebec First Nation are now on board with the project. But there is worry about spills. I'm here about 20 kilometers south of Wrigley in the Deschaux region of the Northwest Territories. Behind me is Enbridge's Pipeline 21, which spilled back in 2011, concerning many residents. According to Pennington, the project is proactive.
From a corporate standpoint, we identified that there's opportunity existed to get in front of any potential issues.
To replace the 2.5-kilometer stretch of new pipeline, drilling will take place 100 meters under the Mackenzie River. What happens to the old pipeline? APTN searched the latest Enbridge newsletter, and the answer to that question was nowhere to be found. According to a press release, the National Energy Board dated back in January, the NEB approved Enbridge's plan to leave the section of the pipe that's being replaced under the Mackenzie River. The plan is to clean and fill the old pipe with grout and cap it off in accordance with NEB regulations. Drilling is scheduled to begin this July. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Fort Simpson.
Community consultations will be going on this week in the Yukon about Canada's new plan to clean up one of the country's biggest environmental mine disasters. Shirley McLean reports.
It's been 20 years since the former owners abandoned the Faro zinc-lead mine site after filing for bankruptcy. It operated from 1969 to 1998. The mine was pit lead zinc mine in the world, and today is roughly the same size as the city of Victoria. Now the site is called one of the most complex remediation projects in Canada. The waste has the potential to leach heavy metals and acid into the surrounding land and water.
The challenge is the scale of it. It's just so much material. 320 million tons of waste rock, 70 million tons of tailings is a significant amount of rock to be able to deal with.
For the last decade, Yukon government, Canada and surrounding First Nations have been working on a plan to remediate the site. Canada, which leads the project, hopes to submit a final cleanup plan to Yukon's environmental watchdog by the end of the year and work to start by 2022. It's seeking input from communities most affected by the mine site located in central Yukon. Director of the project, Lou Spanola, says the focus is on upgrading existing water diversions and collecting contaminated water.
The overall goal of the plan is to collect as much contaminated water as we can to minimize that from getting off-site and impacting the surrounding environment, and to keep as much clean water from getting onto the property, to keep it clean, run it around the property, and keep it safe for the environment.
Measures in the plan have been put in place for local hire and Indigenous companies to bid on the reclamation work and be trained as environmental monitors.
This is in Ross River's backyard, and obviously Aboriginal, Ross River in particular, but Aboriginal groups, they are the land stewards. So to be able to have them do the water quality monitoring and environmental monitoring is going to be very important for the project going forward.
It's estimated the mine site won't be fully closed until 2037, and the final taxpayer bill to clean up the site was estimated at $500 million 10 years ago. Spanola says the number will have to be revised. Shirley McLean, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
It was a 3-year fight between a Cree teenager and the Government of Canada over braces for her teeth. After spending over $100,000 in legal fees to avoid paying for the $8,000 braces, the federal government has agreed to settle. The 13-year-old girl's doctor said she needed the braces to fix chronic pain in her teeth and jaw. But the non-insured health benefits program denied the coverage, saying it wasn't medically necessary. As part of the settlement with the girl's family, the feds now have changed their orthodontic coverage.
Hearings at the Quebec inquiry into the relationship between government services and Indigenous peoples has resumed. More on that coming up after the break.
And the Chief Commissioner of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls will join us to talk about the extension granted today. But first, here's a look at tomorrow's weather forecast.
Cloud throughout the Maritimes on Wednesday and a high of 10 in Charlottetown and Halifax. Cloudy 2 in Labrador, just 4 in Cartwright. Some sunshine, though, in northern Quebec, 3 in Kuujjuaq. A mix of sun and cloud in southern Quebec, 17 in Montreal. 21 and sunny in Windsor, Ontario, 17 in North Bay. Cloudy and 15 in Wawa, 17 in Sioux Lookout. 19 in both Flin Flon and the Pas, Manitoba. 22 and sunny around Dauphin. Nothing but sunshine in southern Saskatchewan, 25s from Saskatoon right down to Estevan. Buffalo Narrows and La Ronge, 18 and 19 respectively.
Welcome back. With more on today's announcement to extend somewhat the national inquiry, we are joined by Chief Commissioner Marion Buller. Commissioner, thank you so much for being with us. Minister Bennett appears to be making a statement with today's announcement. What is your take on the minister's denial of your request for a 2-year extension?
Well, my take, first of all, is that all of us here at the National Inquiry are very disappointed, deeply disappointed. We put a lot of work into our request for 2 years. It was a well-thought-out, well-reasoned, well-researched request based on facts, and I'm just very disappointed that the government rejected that request.
What are your thoughts as to why what would be their motivation in denying this request?
You know, that's really difficult to say. I'm not a mind reader, but I know the government, through Minister Bennett, said today that they wanted to be able to act on the report before the next election, that there wasn't consensus amongst the provinces and territories, and they had heard from some people who wanted an answer sooner than 2 years.
Commissioner Audette has said that she needs a few weeks to digest this. Are you concerned the effect that today's announcement is going to have on the commissioners and where we go from here in terms of the inquiry?
Well, it's been a blow to us, to be honest. We have to go back to the drawing board, so to speak, and rework our plans over the next couple of months. We, as I said, put a lot of work and thought into a very careful analysis for 2 years, and that was rejected.
You guys have been beat up a little bit, as you're well aware, publicly. Do you think that this was do you take this as piling on by the minister?
I don't know if it's piling on, but it wasn't what we were expecting or hoping.
And you had said, too, without the announcement today, that there's you don't think you can do any more regional meetings. There's no more money to be had. You guys have done 15. How many more did you think were needed?
Well, what we had hoped to be able to do was to have hearings in each province and territory to address specific regional issues. Because what we're finding as we go across Canada is that in topics such as child welfare, education, health, housing, which are all provincial jurisdictions, the laws and the policies are different all across Canada and affect Indigenous people differently across Canada. So we had hoped to be able to dig deeply into provincial and territorial jurisdictional issues, and I don't think we're going to be able to do that now.
Do you know what provinces or territories oppose this extension?
No, I don't know, and I wouldn't know. That's a whole series of conversations I'm not privy to.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your insight into this. Thank you.
Thanks.
Now to the Quebec inquiry, where hearings continued in Val-d'Or this week. All day long, Nunavik Justice Officer Lynn St. Louis described her experiences with the Quebec justice system. She testified about language barriers, a lack of communication, and the failure of the traveling courts in Nunavik. St. Louis also criticized the lack of recognition for Indigenous initiatives such as justice committees.
L'appareil judiciaire, c'est comme un royaume. Des fois, les gens, les acteurs qui y sont, je vais dire ça comme je le pense, pensent vraiment qu'ils sont supérieurs, on dirait. C'est vraiment comme ça qu'on le sent des fois. Et que les comités de justice, qui sont des simples citoyens, qui ils sont, eux, pour nous amener des solutions? Qui ils sont, eux, pour intervenir là-dedans? Ça a été dit comme ça, on l'a vécu comme ça, alors voilà. Fait qu'on est loin de l'égal.
Lawyers representing the Laloche, Saskatchewan school shooter have filed an appeal of his sentence. A judge sentenced the now 20-year-old shooter last month to life in prison with no chance of parole for 10 years. This came after a judge decided he should be tried as an adult, even though he was a minor when the crimes were committed. 4 people were killed and 7 were injured by the shooter at a home and at the high school in Laloche in January 2016. No word yet on when appeal hearings may happen.
Coming up, a special honor for a young water protector.
And for Olympia. Those stories and more after the break. In northern Alberta, it's 15 in high level in Fort Chip. Lots of sunshine and heat down south with a high of 28 in Medicine Hat. Over in Quesnel, we have 20, 26 in Penticton. Up at Fort Nelson, 15 degrees. Prince Rupert will be 12. 14 in Whitehorse and Watson Lake. Fort Resolution 10 and Fort Laird 17. Colville Lake 14 in Nuvik 8. Chesterfield and Whale Cove -1. And 1 over in Iqaluit and Cape Dorset.
Welcome back. Water protector Autumn Pelche received another special honor this week, this one from her peers at a Toronto high school. Beverly Andrews has the details.
Students at the Central Toronto Academy painted a mural of Autumn Pelche. Naya Bowen says it's to celebrate Autumn's work and advocacy for water.
Because I thought that water, anyone can drink water from the tap, clean, safe drinking water, until I heard that some people aren't being treated as fairly as they should have, or they should, because this is their territory, this is their land, and we are disrespecting them by not providing them with clean and safe drinking water as we are.
This mural is part of the Power Portraits Trailblazing Team project. It takes over spaces on campus and fills them with works of art, recognizing youth activists and the work they do.
We're so proud of what she's doing, so we wanted to honor her contributions and students to see her face every day when they're going up the stairs, to remind themselves of what they can be capable of doing as well.
A special ceremony officially unveiled the mural and celebrated art and water protection. Autumn and her family were present to see the mural for themselves.
It's really cool to hear and see that there's kids actually hearing my message and hearing what I want to say, and they're listening, and it's just really amazing.
The school encourages students to get involved and take action on important issues.
We want people and kids and other students, anyone walking through these hallways, to ask questions and to wonder, to learn about autumn and how water needs to be taken more seriously because we only get a certain supply of water.
The mural took a labor-intensive 2 weeks to complete, with more murals of youth activists to come. Beverly Andrews, APTN National News, Toronto.
A familiar face here on APTN has been recognized by the Governor-General for her contributions to sport, culture, and art. It's not Olympia, it's an Olympian. Waneek Horn-Miller was among those awarded the Meritorious Service Decoration today at Rideau Hall. The Olympian is a role model for healthy eating and living active. She's a well-known motivational speaker and huge supporter of youth in sport. Horn-Miller said she was surprised and happy to receive the honor along with another Mohawk from Ganawage. She called the gift good medicine.
I was a young Mohawk woman, Indigenous woman, who had this crazy dream of going to the Olympics. I was raised by a single mother. My father went to residential school. I didn't grow up with a father. I had incredible older sisters and younger sisters, and we fought and we worked and we dreamed and we supported each other. And out of that, my family has really shown how you can reach your dreams through hard work and dedication.
And a big congrats. Well, last week we reported on an Indigenous Fashion Week held in Toronto. We told you it was the first of its kind when, in fact, the city has hosted similar events in the past. We regret the error. And that's all the time we have for today. For news anytime, including much more on the extension for the inquiry, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. Have a great night.
Thanks. We'll see you again here tomorrow night.